welcome to installment 2 of Short Story Writing for Beginners. And today I want to talk about the climax a little more. Most of what I'm going to tell you, I'm culling from Save the Cat Strikes Back, the third book in Snyder's great trilogy on screenwriting. But everything in screenwriting transfers very well over to the writing world. And I really like the way he breaks his climax down into 5 points. And I'm going to go over that. And there were a few things I missed out of the other lecture on the 7-point short story structure. The big one happens at the climax. After you've made it past your 5th point, nothing new can enter the story. You can't all of a sudden give the character some strength he didn't have before the climax, or some new item he can use in the climax. He has to already have acquired this in an intelligent manner. Things shouldn't just come to him, he should have to earn them. So the 5-point climax, let's go over that. And I'll give you 2 examples of it, one taken from reality and one I'm going to make up in my head as I go. So the 5-point climax is like this. Your main character, who's going to become your hero, he's not your hero till the end of the book, he's just some guy. He's a bit more heroic, having come through the middle part of your story and gone through all the tests and trials. He has changed. He's definitely not the same person he was when he entered in the middle portion of your story. And in that change, in that transference, he's going to start to become to the point where he's getting closer and closer to becoming God. The Jesus story in Christianity follows this mythic structure perfectly. But we're not dealing with entire mythic structure here. We're dealing with just a 7-point simple plot elements. We aren't really going into the transcendence and the resurrection or anything like that so much. But you do have to make sure that your character does change. Your character has to change from the beginning and the end. And the more that character changes on an emotional level, the more emotion and the more powerful your book is going to be. So we go into the climax. And the character should be vastly outnumbered and outgunned. That doesn't mean he's got to be fighting people with guns and a big army of people. He could be fighting a thing like racism. He could be fighting a machine. He could be fighting a government. He could be fighting himself. He could be fighting some dark part of himself. If you ever watched the movie Leaving Las Vegas, there's a movie that had very little character arc. It was a good movie, but it was very unorthodox because the character didn't really experience a character arc at all. He just went to Vegas and drank himself to death, exactly like he said he was going to do at the beginning of the movie. It did work, for me anyway, on some level, but it definitely didn't follow proper story structures. So once you know proper story structure, feel free to break all the rules you want. But get some stories written with proper story structure first, because those stories are going to ring true with your audience and give you the confidence to go off on your own. Now, the 5-point plot structure is as this. The character has a solution to the problem. It's not a great solution. He's outnumbered. He's outgunned. It seems wild and harebrained. But there is a possibility. There has to be a possibility it can work. Now, let me take an example from the Avengers movie. Iron Man comes back to Stark Tower, meets up with Loki, and Loki laughs at him and says, I have a vast interstellar army coming to destroy your planet. And so all of a sudden, Tony Stark's character, Iron Man, looks completely like his plan is going to be no good. His plan's just been thrown to the wind. There's a whole army coming. But what does he say? He says, oh yeah? We got a Hulk. So now all of a sudden it's not so crazy. He's balanced it back. And I noticed in most movies this happens in dialogue. Think of Star Wars. They said, you have to shoot through a hole in the Death Star that's 2 feet by 2 feet. And then I can't remember what Luke's friend was, but his name, it doesn't matter. What he said was, that's impossible. And Luke says, which makes a harebrained idea, impossible. And Luke says, no, that's not much larger than shooting womp rats back at home. All of a sudden Luke says it's possible. So it's harebrained, probably not going to work, but there has to be a shred of possibility. The part 2 of the climax. The plan is put to action. And at first, it seems to look like it's working. The good guys are gaining ground. But sooner or later, the bad guys come back and begin to crush the good guys. And things look very bleak. The third part is, the bad guys are now totally trumping the big guys. And it's at this point in time where a lot of times you'll see movies where a ticking clock is introduced. In the Avengers, to use the Avengers again, the ticking clock was the nuclear missile launched at Manhattan. Now, not only do they have to worry about this army that's attacking them from outer space, they have a nuclear missile that's going to be there in 4 minutes. So now your character has to think again, and he has to dig really deep and find a new solution to the problem. And it's got to be a solution that is divine, as in it somehow comes from God, and it's got to be a solution he would never have thought of doing before going through the trials and tests of the middle section of the story. In in the Avengers, it's Iron Man. This is your hero of your story. Your hero of the story has to be the one who ultimately solves the problem. Iron Man decides he's going to take the missile and bring it out of the atmosphere and save everybody. But in the end, it's going to end up giving up his own life. And that's the divine part of it. There's nothing more divine than self-sacrifice. So Iron Man takes the missile up, launches it at the porthole where all these alien armies are coming through. In the meantime, he's actually destroying their mothership, which destroys all them back on Earth. He didn't know about that. But he loses consciousness and plummets back to Earth and is lying there dead. Now, under normal mythic structure, which I don't really want to go too far into, there is a death, a symbolic death, or a real death. In this case, it looks like a real death. And then there's a resurrection. And the resurrection happens when the Hulk leans over Iron Man and roars, jolting him awake. Now he's resurrected, and now he's the true hero. But those are the 5 points. He starts off with a harebrained plan with a smidge of a chance it can work. They lose. The bad guys strike back, possibly with a ticking clock in the process. He comes up with a new idea, and this one comes from the divine, and something that he wouldn't have thought of before going through the trials and tests of the middle of your book, or your story, and then executes the plan, and it works. And if you can have him die, or some sort of death, and then come back, all the more better for you. But that's his character arc, because he shows action that he would never have done before all the trials and tribulations of the middle. So he has grown through all the adversity and ordeal that he faced. And that's about it for the climax. Next time I'm going to talk about character voice as opposed to authorial voice. There's 2 different things there. I will talk about authorial voice a little bit just so you know the contrast of the 2, but I'm mainly going to talk about author voice, because author voice is very important, and it really dovetails into point of view, which I think is a very important concept beginner writers seem to stumble with, and it really shouldn't be stumbling. It's pretty straightforward. And I'll make sure I break it all down for you so it's really simple. Okay, thanks for watching, and that's it for today. Michael out. So my last session was on the climax, and I had started this session by saying I was going to give you one real-life example, which I did with the Avengers and Star Wars, so I gave you 2. But I also said I was going to make one up on the fly, just to show you that the same climax will work with any movie. So let's say we have a comedy romance, and our hero has met the girl, and they get along really well, and then of course something happens to come between them, and he loses the girl. Every movie's like this. And then he realizes he wants her back. But the complication is she's about to fly to meet her parents and live with them for the rest of her life somewhere down in Texas. And our story takes place in Maine. So he's got 2 hours. Now he takes place in New York. New York would be better. He's got 2 hours to get to the JFK airport, and it's bumper to bumper traffic, and he's in gridlock. So what does he do? Drives up on the sidewalk, just keeps going. He knows he's got to get there. He doesn't know what he's going to do when he gets there, but he's just got to get there. Drives up on the sidewalk, weaves in and out of traffic, causes car crashes, causes police crashes, just takes off. Maybe he gets pulled over by a cop and somehow talks the cop into letting him go because the girl of his dreams is about to walk out of his life forever. So, exhausted and with a dozen roses that are all wilted and broken from being in the backseat of his car, he pulls into the airport parking lot, and with only 10 minutes to go, and he runs through the main gates, and there she is getting her ticket, and she's just about to walk out, and he says, "Stop!" And now he doesn't have a plan, but he's trying to come up with something really fast. So his plan is, well, when they met, she liked him for his sense of humor, and he told her this joke. So he's going to tell her the joke again. Now, that's not a very good plan. Odds are it's not going to work. But it just might be crazy enough to work. So that's his plan, and he executes it. And at first, it looks like her heart's melting a little bit, and maybe she's going to come back. Maybe she's going to put that ticket down and just walk back to him. But then she does, and he hears over the loudspeakers that her plane will be boarding any minute. So she's all flustered and turns around, and she says, "I just got to go." And she starts walking away. And now he's got a ticking clock. So as happens in the third stage, the ticking clock of 8 minutes until she has to get on the plane. He reaches down as low as he can in himself and tries to find that one thing he can say. And one of the things she didn't like about him and why they broke up was because she said he was afraid of commitment. And so he reaches down, and now after all the ordeals he's gone through, he's about to say the one thing he would never have said before the movie started. And he yells out, "But I love you." And she turns around because it was the last thing she expected him to say. And she says, "I love you too." And of course it comes from the divine, because divine's all about love. And it is pulled out of the ordeal he went through trying to get to her after he lost her and learning that he really did need her in his life. And they end up both flying down to Texas and both moving with her mom. And her mom is the only one that loses out. They're both recklessly happy, have 7 kids, and it's the end of the movie. But you can see the same 7-point plot outline works in an action movie, a superhero movie, and a romantic comedy.